Hey everyone, it's Brandy and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing my November wrap up. I would have filmed this and uploaded it last week, but if you guys did not know, I was sick pretty much. I felt like for maybe like the last week and a half or so, maybe even the last 2 weeks. And I was trying to get shorter videos filmed because whenever I was trying to talk for too long, I was coughing a lot, and then I felt like stuff was sticking me in my throat. I was coughing so hard, I felt like I was actually gagging. That's how hard I was coughing. So figured short videos were the best way to go. I'm feeling a lot better now. My voice has still been going in and out, so hopefully I can get through all of this video, and then I want to film something else after this, but we will see. In November, I read 11 books, and I did this a little weird this month because the first 5 books that I finished this month were rereads for me, and I listened to the audiobooks for them, and I will talk about that in a minute. But I included the books towards the page count, but I didn't include them for my overall rating for the month. So getting into that, I read a total of 4,536 pages in November. Read quite a few big books, so that really helped with that. And my overall rating for November was a 4.3 stars. As always, I'm going to go from my lowest rated book to my highest rated, but before I get into those, I'm actually going to talk about the books that, like I said, I decided not to rate, which was my rereads. And for that, I decided to reread the entire Lux series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This was not initially in my plans to read these. I only had a few books on my TBR for the month, especially considering that November was the month for NaNoWriMo, so I was going to be focusing on that. However, I was feeling really bad about not reading, so in order to kind of help with that, I decided to just listen to audiobooks, and I decided to just go ahead and try a reread through audio instead of finding a brand new book. And these are the bind up editions. So the first one, which like I said, Lux Beginnings, has Obsidian and Onyx in it, which is, like I said, books 1 and 2. This bind up, which is Lux Consequences, has books 3 and 4, Opal and Origin. And then finally, this is Lux Opposition, or it's just Opposition. Lux is the name of the series. And then this one also has I think it's a prequel novella included in here, which is like from Dawson and Bethany's perspective. I didn't technically reread that one through audio because it wasn't like included in the audiobook. So I might have read maybe like 20, okay, maybe a little bit, maybe like 30 pages less than what I said, because Goodreads counts all of this as one, and the novella is included in this. So I think this one was like 500 pages, so maybe like 30 or so pages less than what I said was my total. So maybe like, I've always really enjoyed the series. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this is a series that got me back into reading after not reading for a while. The audiobooks are okay. I started to have an issue with the audiobooks, I think, in the third book, which is when the perspectives start to shift. So instead of one POV, just having it in Katie like in the first 2 books. I believe it's the third one when we have both Katie and Damon. And the audiobook narrator, like the female, was the same throughout all the books. However, when Damon came in, and I don't know who the guy was, I didn't actually look it up, but he sounded way older than Damon should have sounded. I feel like Damon is only like 17, I think. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the series he's 17. And when whoever this narrator was, he sounded like he was like in his 30s or more. And it just did not feel right. And I think that's the first time that I've ever experienced that, where I felt like I couldn't get into the story because of the actual narrator's voice and the way they sounded for the character. It just did not match. Just imagine, like, you know, it's maybe not as big of an issue now, but just imagine like this 30-year-old dude dating a high schooler. Like, that's what it sounded like when listening to this. And I know that's probably like a really weird way to phrase it, but that's what it sounded like. And not saying that the female main character or narrator always sounded like, you know, like a 16, 17-year-old, but I felt like her voice fit way better than the guys. And then when you brought them up against each other, it just felt really wrong, and I didn't like it. I kept listening to it though. I finished these books off first in the beginning of the month when I was still attempting to do NaNoWriMo before I like completely failed at that. But yeah, these were the first few books, or 5 books technically, that I read. Now we're going to move on into my lowest rated and work our way up. So the next book that I have to talk about is Hate Notes by Vi Keelan, or is it V Keelan? I'm not sure how to say her name. I think I just call her Vi Keelan, and Penelope Ward. This book follows, I always suck at this, but I can never remember characters' names, especially in like these romancy type books. But it starts off following this female main character. At the beginning, she is trying to sell her wedding dress because she found out that her fiance was cheating, and she called off the wedding. So she's in the store and she finds out that they don't actually give you cash for the dresses or whatever you're trying to sell. They just give store credit, and she was really hoping for the cash because she's really not doing too well. Okay, so I had to go look up what happened in this book because I read another book by Vi Keeland, and I think I'm like mixing the plots of the two up. But like I was saying, she goes to sell her wedding dress, and the store gives her credit, and she ends up buying another wedding dress that was left in there. And inside this dress, she finds this note that's sewn into like the inside of it. She ends up like looking him up, and she got drunk, and then next thing she know, like I think it's the next day, and she gets a call about coming to see this like really expensive apartment or something like that. And so she goes to see, and the guy is like the real estate agent or something of that sort. And he ends up telling her off because she like lied on this application to get to this thing, but she was drunk, so she doesn't even remember what she said. And one thing leads to another, and his grandmother, who also owns the company, ends up offering her a job. So she ends up working as a secretary for the company that they run, and like he is almost like one of her immediate bosses. And one thing leads to another, leads to a type of romance. He has this big secret and all of these things. I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. So I had to go get my little it's like a reading journal type of thing that you can record all your stuff, and then it's a section for like you can write a quick little review. So I had to go get this because I could not remember why I rated this on 2 stars. So basically I was saying that it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the story, it didn't bring anything new to the genre, and that was like a big thing for me, I guess, because I have been reading so many contemporary romances. It had like a formulaic plot, and I don't really like that. I know sometimes I read some but that have that same formula, but there's always something that makes it feel different, and this one just did not have that for me. Despite some of the heavier topics which came in with the main male lead's secret that he had that he really didn't want to talk about, despite those heavy topics, the two of them had a pretty easy life. He came from a family with money, so despite his situation that he was in, he was able to use his money to go and try to find a better way or find opinions on what was going on with him. I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to give anything away. And despite the fact that the main female lead had her own problems at the beginning of the story, pretty early on, things start happening to her pretty easily. Not saying that she's not good at what she does. However, she was offered a job after straight up lying to somebody. And I mean, it was a different situation, but she was offered this job at the time she needed it most. It was really good pay for what she was doing. And things just started coming really easily to her. Yeah, she had to deal with the jerk of the boss, but that ends up working out in the end as well. Things are just too easy for them, basically. And I just find that that's unrealistic, or maybe it's realistic for some people, but I just feel like most people don't have that type of life where things are just handed to them, or they have the means to fix, or maybe not fix anything, but they have the means to find other alternatives for a situation that they're in. So the next book that I have to talk about, I gave a 3 out of 5 stars, and that was Boss Man by Vi Keelan. So after reading this, I decided that I wanted to give the authors another chance, and I decided maybe I should try some of their individual work. So I picked up this one by Vi Keelan. I think this one was also available through the romance package, through Audible. So I listened to this audiobook as well. So with this one, it's kind of starting to come back to me after like looking at the synopsis a little bit. So this starts off, don't remember the names of these characters either because I pretty much suck at that. This one starts off with the main female lead. She is on this date. I don't know if it was a blind date or if she like had been talking to this guy for a while, but date isn't really going the way she hoped it would. So she is like back by the bathroom trying to call her best friend to get her to call to try to get her out of this date, saying it's like a family emergency or something. And while she's doing this guy ends up overhearing her, and he pretty much calls her out on it. Turns out he's on a date as well, and when he goes back to his table, he ends up bringing his date over to her table, and they end up having like this weird double date thing, and it's just like really awkward. And like he ends up lying and making up this whole story about how they know each other from so and so, and he's talking about how they used to date and all of this stuff. And it was like a really awkward moment, but the two of them had this weird chemistry. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah. So they part ways. They don't like exchange any contact information or anything after that. But she ends talking to this other guy, and she decides to randomly go with him to the gym. I think he invited her to the gym, and she had looked this guy up, so she saw the logo for that gym on his shirt on a picture he had, I think on Facebook or some equivalent of that. So she was just like, okay, I'll go. And then, she was like, well, I'm being stupid just because that was there, just because he had that on doesn't mean he go to this gym, blah, 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 blah. She ends up bumping into him again, and he makes up another story about how they know each other and all these things. In the midst of all of this, she quit her previous job because like she ended up hooking up with her boss, and then she found out that he was like in a relationship and he was about to be engaged, or maybe he was already engaged or something like that, and she didn't know ahead of time. And then she got passed over for a promotion because he was like a family member of the owner of the business. She was on her way to an interview. Before she actually got there, she ended up running her mouth about how she got passed over because he was part of the, he was family to the, part of the family that owned the business. And she was talking about she had another interview and she'll do that because that's the job she really wants. And turns out the person she was talking to is actually the person that was interviewing her, and she was like part of the family who owned that business that she was interviewing for. So that didn't work out, and then the other job had hired somebody before she even got there. So in the midst of all of this other stuff with this meeting up with this guy randomly, she's also looking for a job. And she bumps into him at the gym when she goes with this guy that she's talking to, maybe even dating. I don't really know where they're at that stage, but this is like after the whole interview situation. So she decides to go with him to the gym, and like I said, she ends up running into this guy again, and he makes up this whole other story about how they know each other. And the guy that she's with, he leaves to go work out because he thinks that they're cousins or something like that. So he leaves to go work out, and she ends up telling him that she's out of a job. So he ends up talking to someone that he works with, or works for him, I guess technically, about finding her a job. The woman that he contacts finds her a job at his company, and they end up working together. They have this sexual chemistry between each other. She's trying to tell him like, maybe we shouldn't because we work together. And he was just like, I really don't care. But he's respecting her boundaries that she set up. This was another one that had sort of a darker side to it, but it was also kind of just average for me. It wasn't anything exceptional, so I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I'm going to talk about was one of my 4-star reads, and then the last 3 books I'm going to talk about, I have physical copies for all 3 of those. So the next one that I have is one of my 4-star reads, and this is Switch Hitter by Sarah Nye. This is a prequel novella to her Jock Hard series. This specific novella follows the set of twin sisters. We have the one sister who likes to party, and her twin sister is just like, she likes to go out, have a good time, but she's not like her sister pretty much. But they are pretty much identical. They have a few differences about them, but they pretty much look the same. Her sister has these 2 dates. She has a date with a baseball player and then this other guy, and she asks her sister to go out with the guy who is the baseball player because she's like, he's moving too slow, he's not really doing what I want him to do. And she was like, he's just too polite, and could you just go for me because I want to go out with this other guy. And she ends up going even though she didn't really want to, and she finds that she has a connection with this guy that she wasn't expected to have, especially considering that he was a baseball player. She pretty much judged him based off of being a jock, but he's really polite. He's not trying to do anything with anybody who he doesn't feel like he can have a connection with. And on his end, he's just like, this is completely different from all the other times I have been with her. He's like, I don't know what happened, what changed, but I'm liking this person who's here now way more than whoever, how she was before. So we're kind of flipping back and forth between their perspectives, because he's like, now he's interested because it's this twin sister that's going instead of the one he was originally with. She's interested in the baseball player, or the twin sister that went on the date pretending to be her sister. She likes him, but she's like, I can't do anything because he's with my sister, or this is, my sister's with him, I can't do this. And they go out a couple times, and now he's just like, I want to date you, I want you to be my girlfriend, because he's like, I don't know what happened before, but now I feel this connection between us. And just a lot of craziness. And you could probably guess what happened. I don't want to give anything else away because it is a novella under 150 pages. Really enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this one as much as I did, even though I had enjoyed Jock Row. I don't really like, I don't want to say I don't like, because I think this is the first time I read it, but just the whole concept of twins switching places in terms of dating, I think that's just completely wrong, and I don't think that, I don't like the idea of that. So when going into this, I was already kind of skeptical. I was just like, I'm gonna hate this. But I ended up loving the connection that that the one sister had with the baseball player, and how everything ended up wrapping up and all of those things. So really enjoyed this one. The next book that I have to talk about that I gave a 4 out of 5 stars to was The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. This is book 2 in the Bone Season series. So I read the Bone Season in October. This is November. I'm supposed to be reading Song Rising in December. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it's on my TBR. Anyway, this book is pretty much following the event after the end of the Bone Season. I honestly don't want to get into the synopsis of this one because I don't want to spoil the Bone Season if you have not already read it and want to read it. Just know that I really enjoyed this one. I will say that I felt like this story was a lot slower than the Bone Season, although not a lot happened in the Bone Season either. I felt like more was going on. I think a lot of this book was getting the plot and the characters in position for what's going to happen in the rest of the series, and we got to learn a little bit more about the different, I don't want to say creatures, but the different types of people slash creatures, I guess, would always also count, that take place in this world. So we get to learn about more of the voyants and how they actually came to be. And we get to learn a little bit more about the Rephaim and the rebellion that happened, and we get to learn about more of the players that were in that rebellion and what led to the downfall of that. There were a lot of reveals in this one that just really shocked me, and the ending, like maybe the last 20 to 25% of this, I was just like, this is wild, and I couldn't believe it. And I am looking forward to seeing what happens in the song Rising. I felt bad because I can't really talk about anything with this one, but just know that I enjoyed it, even though it was a little slow, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. So the last two books that I have to talk about that I read in November was Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows, both by Sarah J Maas. This is books 3 and 4 in the Throne of Glass series. I gave Heir of Fire a 4 out of 5 stars and Queen of Shadows a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I won't get too much into the details about either of these books because I did film reading vlogs for both of these. However, I am still working on them. My Heir of Fire reading vlog was like 2.5 hours of raw footage, and I did start editing that before, but I think I got to a point where I was just really tired of editing, so I started cutting a lot out, and then I realized I was cutting out stuff that I had assumed I was keeping in there later on. So when I was doing updates, I was like, so I talked about this and this, already, and I had cut that part out. So I decided to go back and start over from scratch, and I have started editing. So I'm going to do a little bit every day, and I am planning on posting that Heir of Fire reading vlog on Friday, and I'm going to be starting my Empire of Storms one after I'm done filming this. But I can say that with each of the books in the series, I feel like it's getting better and better. After Crown of Midnight, I wasn't I liked it, I enjoyed it because it was better than Throne of Glass. However, I still felt, I don't remember if I talked about this, I still felt like I didn't really care all that much, but Heir of Fire kind of completely changed the game for me. I think because in Heir of Fire we start to get introduced into a lot of the focus of the rest of the series. But just know, I really enjoyed both of these books. I will be continuing on with the series. I am actually currently reading Empire Storm. So those were all the books that I finished in November. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next one. Bye.